Up in Sundown Bay, again, back shoreline, all this area back in here. Our tides have been extremely high for a while now. We had big low pressure down there just off the coast of Mexico that even with these big northerns that we had pushing in here, that water stayed, and we were having higher than normal tides. So what happens is when that takes place, you should be able to take advantage of those because it opens up water for you in different areas that you may not have been able to get to before. The great thing about sundown is that you can get to it on a particularly low tide. The one indicator for you is if you're running through there, if you got the right kind of boat to get through it, and you start seeing the crab traps are sticking out of the water halfway, then you know that you got a pretty low tide. So that has not been the case. A lot of this area back here on this back shoreline has been, thigh to waist deep right up against the shore, and that's where a lot of these fish have been hanging out. Up and down this area, you've got a lot of great structure that's in here. There's great grass, there's good mud, you got some shell in some spots. You've got outlets that come back from the back lakes. You've got the island on the other end on this side here. You can fish up against that depending on the kind of wind that you have. Most of the stuff that we've been getting has been north, northwest, northeast. So all this area up in here really sets up. Now, that said, that lower pressure has moved off, and we're starting to get our tides starting to drop out. So we're having really high tides early in the mornings around midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then it's starting to gradually drop out as that moon begins to set or begins to rise depending on where we're at. So we're in our transition phase right now, headed toward a full moon. So transition days or wild card days, whatever. So we've had, again, around the majors and minors have been very good. They've been very productive during those time frames. They've been spot on for people that throw in their artificial. Main baits that we've been throwing in just about any of these estuaries, it's all pretty much the same. The one thing that, we've had some really colder than usual temperatures over the last 10 to 12 days. Water temps have been in the low 50s. They've warmed up to get to the high 50s, maybe low 60s, depending on the amount of sunlight that we get on top of these and how much water's in these areas. But one thing that has really brought to light, though, is the corky game. If you're an avid corky thrower, corky season isn't just during the wintertime. You can throw corkies year-round, but they're really effective during the winter months, the colder months, as those fish are not going to be quite as active. They don't want to move a whole lot. They want to conserve as much energy as possible. So they're looking for one particular meal a day to really kind of hold them over until they get to the next day, and especially pre and post front. Our prefrontal bites have been really good right up until the day or right up until the time frame when that thing is starting to really pass through. And then our post front days have been as expected. They've been pretty tough. Downsizing baits after those is a primary thing that you must be able to do because those fish are not going to be as apt to eat. So they're looking for something a little bit smaller. So again, the corkies, whether you like the Paul Brown originals, you like the Fat Boy floaters or sinkers, doesn't matter. Whatever you like in those, they're becoming very effective. It's starting to become effective. The Soft Dine XL have been very good. Also, the Down South Twisted Tea in the original size, the burner shads have been good, especially on a post front day, big high pressure day that comes in there. Those burner shads have become very effective. Multiple flavors. There's nothing that's just really stands out. Again, Twisted Tea, White Ice, Purple Rain have all been good. Color X has been good. So all those flavors, Chicken of the Sea as well, also in the burner and in the original size of those. In the Knock and Tail, the greenbacks, the heavy metal, the honeydew has been good, and watermelon red as well has been good. So if you find yourself in some of that clear water, once that front has passed through and it starts to kind of calm down, it's like this past weekend we've had some post-frontal days, big old high pressure in place, calm winds. That water's gotten really clear in some areas. So, heavy metal in that, white ice would be good in that. In either the Down South or the Knock and Tail. Also the Mirror Lure, Little John's, Golden Red Glitter, Kitchen Sink have all been very good. Your assortment of your Paul Browns in those as well. You have some translucent bait, or at least the bellies are, and you got a little bit more solid back of those. But those are all flavors that you want to have in your box as you put your waiting box together as we continue to head into the end of November and the 1st of December. These months are not going to do anything. It looks like they're just going to have more just kind of lined up one behind the other. It looks like we may have more of a wet cold winter as opposed to just a dead cold winter, which is fine. Wading, throwing artificials is this time of year, and this is what you want to be able to do, because what you'll be able to do is a lot of these bait has migrated out of here, so there's nothing really much left than small shrimp, crab, and your mullet of assortment sizes. So matching those hatches or matching that type of bait that's left in our system is key to what you'll be able to do. Again, majors and minors, pay attention to what your tides are doing and pay attention to what the weather patterns are doing. Dunham Bay, all up in here. Man, this thing here is loaded. Great shoreline up against the Aransas Wildlife Refuge. On the other side, over on this side over here, you've got a lot more mud, scattered shell. You've got a few back lake mouths that dump into this. It's a kind of it's not a super big area, but as far as shoreline area to fish, when you got these nice north, northwest, northeast winds, you can get up here on this shoreline, and this thing up here is nice and wadeable. You've got good structure in it. You can wade this whole shoreline, man. You've got some drop-offs. You've got shale that's mixed in there with it. You got grass. You got mud, but it's not terribly hard to wade on this particular side of it. It's more firm. You can work it out away from the shoreline if that's what you need. If you got 2, 3, 4 people with you, you got plenty of surface area that you can work and move. Work this thing all the way down toward the tip. All this area up in here. You can wander out here off into this big flat out here. You got some scattered shell out there. There's been redfish that have been on top of this. There's been some scattered drum that's been on top of this as well. Pulled off a few flounder up in here. A lot of good mud that's in here. Be caught soft in this area, so just be aware of that. If you want to get out there close to the ICW, there's big shell bars that are out there on the side of that. It gets soft out there. Can you wade it? Yes. Is it difficult? It can be. It just depends on your skill set and what your capabilities are and what you want to contend with. But it lends itself to, it's pretty much open water, but it can stay warmer than what you typically would if you had a sand bottom, because this time of year you're looking for more mud because it holds heat. And these areas up in here give you that opportunity depending on what kind of day that you have. If you had a big old bluebird sky like we did on Saturday and Sunday, then these areas up in here will heat up a lot faster, and you'll start seeing bait fish work up on there. And that's the key thing this time of year is when you find a little bit of bait working, you want to stay around in that, because what that is those fish are going to stay close to that. And when they're ready to eat and want to try to find something to eat, they don't have to go very far and expend very much energy. That's why the XLs, that's why the Corkies, that's why they're so effective this time of year, because of that profile, just a little bit bigger than normal baits than what you normally would have. So, they're looking for that. So these areas up in here will do that. So again, your down souths in the original and the burner shad have been good up in these areas, especially for pre and post front. Again, the flavors in white ice, purple rain, Texas roach has been pretty good. Twisted tea, key lime in the original size. It's got a white tail on that, so it's in that dirty water. That key lime really kind of stands out against that contrast against that dirtier water. And when you get the right wind, this area up here really will blow out on you. It becomes chocolate milk. So just be aware of that. Again, in the knock and tail lures, heavy metal's been good. The greenback's been good. Honeydew's been good. Watermelon red. All those flavors have been very productive. Nothing is really one particular bait or the other hasn't been just knocking it out of the park, but they've all been pretty consistent across the board. So you can have a wide variety of opportunity and flavors just depending on what your water clarity is and where your wind's coming from. Again, your majors and minors in these areas have been spot on. That's been the most productive for us. This shoreline, you can continue to work this shoreline on around here, especially with that north breeze. You become protected up in here. There's a little back lake mouth that dumps out into this little area here. If you've ever fished that before, it can be very productive. You can hold redfish, it can hold trout, it'll hold flounder. But that one little area that's right in here, if you've been on this shoreline, you know exactly where I'm talking about. It's just about right in this area. So if you're able to fish that and the wind sets it up for you, then jump on there and fish it, especially when you got a little bit higher tides. Now, with our tides continuing to start to drop out throughout the day and have lower tides in the middle of the day, and then the high tides starting to come back late in the evening. Might be a little bit more difficult depending on the areas that you fish. But again, majors, minors, look for your bait working in these areas, and pay attention to what your tides and what your weather is doing. Newcomb Bend. Now, this area in here's got, again, it's got great structure for you. It's got grass, you got mud, you got shale, you got everything that you want. You've got some deep guts that are in here. You've got some drop-offs, but not terribly deep drop-offs, but you do have some drop-offs that are in here. You have a decent amount of bait that's working in here, which is very key for this time of year. Again, lots of the bait that's in our estuaries are all migratory baits, with the exception of having mullet and shrimp and crab here all the time. That's your main bait that's going to be in these areas during the winter months. So that's why it's important to really match profile, maybe color size, or color-wise and size-wise, is that you want to match what that bait looks like and what it's doing in these areas. There's a bunch of great baits that are on the market that mimic what these are, that can help you become very successful when you're throwing your artificials, providing that you're working the areas at the right time and place. Again, I stress majors and minors all the time. For artificial people, the gals that are throwing artificial baits all the time, those are our key points during the process of a fishing day. At some point in time during that time frame, that bite's it's really going to intensify in or around that time frame, whenever that major or minor is that you're fishing. So what you try to do is you try to line up as many positive things in your favor as you possibly can, whether you've got a wind-driven current or a tidal-driven current that's working in your area. If you've got, this is the most important thing, is you got to have the food source working there. Whether it's you see one or two little pieces of mullet that flip, or you see maybe just a little bit of swirl here or there. Sometimes this time of year you don't get to see a lot of bait work, so you need some assistance. So if you see ospreys searching an area, hovering over an area, they're looking at bait. They see bait. So that's a great indicator for you if you see that osprey working in the area that you're trying to fish and you don't see the presence of bait or see bait flipping. But that bird will indicate to you that there is bait there, because they're not going to hover over it if it's not. Pelicans the same way. You'll see them diving on bait. That's another great indicator. They'll establish a bait line for you that you can get on, and you can start working that. You're matching your baits for this. This whole area in here, if you got a nice southeast breeze, Newcomb Bend sets up really good for you. Now, if you've got that northwest, northeast breeze, this is a little bit more difficult. You probably have to start it obviously on this end up here if you've got that type of wind, so you can get down on the shoreline and work all this area down into the corner, up around to the point. You can even work around on Newcomb Point, and come back around into this area and get on this side. If you got a strong north breeze, this is all protected up in here, and it sets up well for that. And we have found redfish up in here. We have found trout laid up in here. An occasional flounder. Of course, that's flounder. We're still in the catch and release time frame for flounder, and that won't release that until the middle of December. But those fish are hanging in these types of areas. Again, down south lures, that's the flavors that I've already named off are still consistent up in these areas. Your Paul Browns, your Corkies are all great in these areas, because it lends itself to give you an opportunity to find you more quality fish in that. The soft dines, again, knock and tail lures and the flavors that I've already listed. Mirror lured Little Johns are another great bait as well. So seeing what the weather patterns do and how they react and what you're doing, what kind of system is in here. If we got big bluebird skies, high pressure, you want smaller baits. If you still got overcast and cloudy there that we had for about, seemed like forever, for 8 to 10 days, we're just constantly blowing out of the north, northeast. It was overcast, cloudy, lots of water in the system, much more chilly, colder water. So you want a little bit more lethargic, very methodical bait and presentation on how you work these areas during those time frames. Those are all things that you must take in consideration when you're throwing artificials. The more that you get to do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more productive that you get with it. So again, majors, minors, look for your baits. Concentrate on certain areas depending on what your weather patterns are doing. The biggest thing is be safe during this time of year, because the weather can jump on you really quick.